Okay, so fertilization. I guess quickly, why do we want to do fertilization? It's, well, the benefits, of course, we get bigger trees faster, basically. And if you do that on the right side, you can make money. And if you do it on the wrong side, you lose money, of course. And then, of course, there's negative risks with the fertilization. And the main risk is the impact on sensitive areas. And that's usually that nutrients end up in the wrong place, particularly aquatic systems. And also lichen areas when you have change of ground vegetations. That's the two main risks, basically. And those we do want to avoid. And to avoid them, you have a buffer zone to prevent against particular streams and peatlands, wet peatlands, I should say, to prevent leaching with the groundwater of nutrients to those areas. And the idea is, of course, in these buffer zone or protection zones, that is 25 meters wide, no fertilization pellets should be landing there, because otherwise you don't have 25 meters of safety distance, so to say. But then, of course, we don't really know where they land. Do they land in these zones or not? We don't really have an idea about that. And the idea with this study, or our plans with the study, I have to say, was to try to investigate that. And the idea was to investigate at least 25 sites that has a protection zone that is at least 60 meters long. We had two types of inventory lines, one with more and less points. And these points were spread out in the entire length of the zones, depending on the zone length, and the number of lines also varied depending on the lengths. And in total, we had, depending on length, we had between 18 and 57 measuring points. And at these measuring points, we basically put scoop nets to try to collect the fertilizer. And the lines looked something like this. With more or less measuring points. And the idea is, of course, that we want to measure at many points along the protection zone. But also we want to measure the total depth of the protection zone, where the fertilization lands, if it lands inside the zone. And of course, we want to have measuring points at the area that is fertilized to make sure that it is actually fertilized, so we don't measure something else, which would be kind of bad. And of course, it's also a compromise between, there's a bit of time consumption to go out and placing these nets in the forest and then collect the fertilization from pellets from the nets as well. So that's also a factor that we have to consider. And of course, when we select objects, since it's a quite close distance between the points, you end up having to have an object where you have a clear border between where the protection objects and where the protection zone starts. So you can basically have to use a measuring tape. Otherwise, you're going to have too much errors. And the placement of this is just an example of how the measuring points and the lines were placed. And this would be for a line that is somewhere between 120 and 180 meters long. And then, of course, the distance between the line varies a bit. So it's not fixed in that sense. But of course, we ran into quite a lot of problems this year, as always. And the major problem was, of course, we had a very short season with fertilization this year. So it was only 2 weeks. And during that period, we also had quite a lot of rain. And rain, of course, dissolved the fertilization pellets. So we don't really know can measure in those conditions. And then another problem was that we only got part of the nets that we have ordered. So we could only actually inventory very short lines or short protection zones. And that was a big problem as well. So we actually ended up with only complete data from one stand, which, well, not great. But at least the method seems to work as long as it's not raining. So we basically have to try to adapt to that the next seasons. And we are going to continue the experiment for two more years, at least. They say they're going to extend the project. So it's not, I mean, we can't really draw a lot of conclusion based on one stand, but it could be that we might be flying a bit too close to the protection area, unfortunately. So there could be some pellets landing in the border, a few in the two measuring points closest to the fertilization area. And that's, of course, there could be some errors because we only have one stand, so there could be some errors with the placement of the measuring points and those kind of things. So we don't really know for sure that it's we need to change methods at the moment. But that's something that we'll see in the future, but it could be needed. And then, of course, we have to thank the partners, and its main financing is from Skogtiltaksfondet, and then it's the partners that we have worked with is Norges Skogeierforbund, Norskog, Glomma Mjøsen Skog, and SP Skog. Yep.
Thank you, Simon.